হ্যালো বন্ধুরা, আজকে রিলেশন ভিডিওতে এমন কিছু ভৌতিক ঘটনা আপনাদের দেখাবো যা দেখলে আপনারা অবাক হয়ে যাবেন এবং অনেক ভয় পেয়ে যাবেন। তো বন্ধুরা, আজকের এই ভিডিওটা কেউ মিস করবেন না, শুরু থেকে শেষ পর্যন্ত দেখার অনুরোধ করছি। তো চলুন ভিডিওটা শুরু করা যাক।
Had been filing unusual reports for months before that night. Nobody had taken them seriously enough. Rock Colony. The camera zoomed in on a hollow opening high up on a rock face and found an entire community inside it. At first, 4 small gray creatures were crouched in the space, pointed ears, elongated limbs, faces angled toward each other mid-conversation. Then one dropped from the opening without hesitation, and a few seconds later, a second followed. Then the camera caught others there too. It looked like a colony, and one of them was holding a metal golden object, as if they were guarding some treasure. Whatever was happening inside that rock had its own structure, completely separate from anything happening at ground level. They weren't hiding exactly. They just had no interest in being part of a world that hadn't made room for them. Angeles sighting. The views from the Angeles National Forest mountains in California draw people out there regularly, but last month, one man saw something that had nothing to do with scenery. Just a few feet away, a white horse-like creature stood with enormous wings folded against its sides. He recognized immediately what he was looking at, even though everything he had ever been told suggested it couldn't exist. He kept filming, trying to hold the camera steady, and then the Pegasus spread its wings fully and lifted off. Within seconds, it was gone, absorbed into the sky above the tree line. He searched for it afterward and found nothing. The footage is the only proof that the moment happened at all. River visitors. A fisherman out on the river alone at night had company surface beside his boat without any warning. 2 of them, pale-faced with glowing yellow eyes, gripped the edge of the vessel and stared directly at him. One appeared to have just risen from somewhere deep below, still ascending slowly as the other held on. They stayed there for a few seconds long enough that the silence between them and the fisherman became something heavy, then drifted silently back into the dark water. No splash, no aggression, just those eyes, and then nothing. He never went back to that stretch of the river. Whatever those 2 were, they had made him feel like the intruder. Karakoram statement. Deep in the Karakoram mountain range, a camera caught something enormous moving out of a cave entrance, broad, dark, heavily built, carrying its size like something that had never once felt threatened in those mountains. In one hand, it held a thick wooden log, and it brought it down against the rocky ground repeatedly, each impact sending a dust cloud rising around it. It wasn't hunting, it wasn't fleeing, it was making a point. The strikes were deliberate, rhythmic, aimed at nothing except the act of being heard. Something that size, that deep in the Karakorams, armed and completely unhurried, wasn't interested in sharing those mountains. It was simply letting whatever was watching understand that. Behind him, a man was recording himself on a trail through Yosemite National Park last year, narrating his walk completely at ease. He had no idea what was on the mountain behind him. The camera caught it clearly, a massive pale creature with broad, powerful shoulders and a head noticeably too small for its body, moving along the ridge. Its roars were rolling down through the mountains in waves. The man kept walking, kept talking, completely calm because he assumed the sounds were coming from some animal far away. He never turned around. He never saw it. Whether that was lucky or not depends entirely on what that creature would have done if he had caught him. White wings. A group of friends camping at Mount Rainier National Park heard something in the distance, a deep, strange sound that pushed through the tree line and stopped all of them at once. When they looked toward it, a winged silhouette moved against the dark. They stayed completely still and waited, and eventually the creature wandered into a clearing where they could actually see it. White body, broad wings, moving peacefully through the forest like it had no reason to hide. It appeared to be the only one of its kind. They watched it for a while, then made a quiet decision none of them argued with. They left it alone. Swamp warning.
¿Estás bien? Eso no es un pez.
While moving through a swamp at night, a research team swept their light across the water, and the whole group froze. Rising from the dark surface was a massive black creature, long-necked, broad-shouldered, with glowing white eyes and a jaw held wide open the moment the beam hit it. It didn't charge. Instead, it rose higher and shifted its weight slowly, making itself larger, expanding into the space between them and the tree line. It was a warning, not an attack, and every person in that group understood it immediately. Nobody discussed what to do. They just turned around and left. Whatever lived in that swamp had made the boundary very clear. Backyard woods.
Back up.
In 2024, a man spotted something at the edge of the woods behind his home and filmed it before it ran. Glowing eyes, gray skin, a face that looked almost deliberately wrong. And when he posted the footage, people pushed him to go back and find it again. So he did. This time, it was already watching him. Its eyes were locked on him from the moment he entered the tree line, and it began moving closer on slender gray limbs that made absolutely no sound. He called out for backup, voice cracking, backing away slowly. The creature never lunged, but it followed him far enough to make clear that the second visit had been a mistake.
Back up.
River Fisher.
Te dije que había visto esta criatura pescando aquí en la cascada. No estoy.
Perched on a rock in the middle of a rushing river, completely absorbed and completely unbothered, sat something that looked ancient. It was hunched and bald, wrapped in tattered cloth, holding a thin stick over the churning water below it like a fishing rod. It never looked up, never reacted to the current roaring around it. Whatever it was had clearly been sitting on that rock long before anyone with a camera arrived, and fully intended to keep sitting there long after. Something that old and that comfortable in the middle of a raging river didn't belong to any era that still shows up on maps.
¿No vale?
Cave crawler.
Keep on.
On February 8th of this year, a speleologist exploring Pinnacles National Park in California was approaching the Bear Gulch cave system when something moved at the entrance and made him stop. It was small and pale, its light gray skin matching the surrounding rocks so closely that he almost missed it. The limbs were oddly humanoid, too proportioned, too deliberate for any cave animal he recognized. Before he could get the camera up, it had already crawled inside and vanished into the dark. He's planning to go back in and explore deeper. Whatever he saw that morning has made him certain that those caves are hiding far more than rock formations.
Keep on.
Cavekeeper. Hikers moving through a remote mountain range looked up at a cave entrance high on the rock face and saw something sitting in it that none of them could explain. It was large and gray-skinned, hunched with its legs folded beneath it, completely motionless, and directly in front of it sat a small skull placed with intention, like a marker or a tribute. It didn't move. It just held that position in the mouth of the cave like it had been doing exactly that for years. Those mountains had always seemed empty to the people who passed through them. They had been walking beneath something for a very long time without knowing it. The drone chase. Last year, a content creator flying his drone over a road near Hocking Hills State Park in Ohio caught something that turned a routine recording session into something else entirely. A massive humanoid figure was chasing a person across the terrain below, closing the gap fast. Then it slowed, not out of exhaustion, but deliberately, like it was letting the distance open back up before closing it again. There was never any realistic chance of escape. The content creator watched through his screen, convinced he was looking at Bigfoot, and kept the drone in the air. He stopped recording before the chase ended. Whatever conclusion he arrived at, he decided to keep it to himself. The dock post.
Somebody call the sheriff! Back up! Get away from the rail. You hear me? Call him up!
Something was already climbing when the camera found it. Pale, clawed hands gripping a barnacle-covered dock post just above the waterline, gray-skinned and unmistakably humanoid. with pointed ears and a face that turned directly toward the lens the moment the light hit it. It stared without flinching, still pulling itself upward, before releasing its grip and dropping back beneath the surface. The water swallowed it in a swirl of pale mist, and then went completely still. Whatever it was had spent a long time in that water, long enough that surfacing felt effortless and disappearing felt even easier. Nobody on that dock went near the edge again that night.
Oh my God. Slide under.
Tamed beast. Climbing Mount Charleston, Nevada for high-altitude training last August, an athlete stopped when he spotted a scene in the distance that didn't belong in any landscape he knew. A group of people stood in front of a massive dark creature with a wolf-like frame, but no wolf grows anywhere near that size. What struck him more than its appearance was its behavior. It wasn't aggressive. It was calm, almost passive, responding to the people around it like it had been conditioned to. The athlete stood there watching and arrived at the only explanation that made sense to him. This was an uncontacted group, living somewhere beyond the trails, and that beast had been with them long enough to trust them. The Custer Cave. Custer State Park in South Dakota is well mapped, well visited, and considered one of the safest hiking destinations in the region. One man wandered past the marked trails and found a cave that wasn't on any map. Something walked out of it before he could decide whether to stay or leave. It had a wolf-like face, dark fur across a humanoid frame, and moved with the kind of ease that suggested this was its territory and had been for a long time. He left immediately and reported it to the tourist guides on his way out. They told him there were no known caves in that area, and definitely no werewolves. Cave discovery. An explorer pushing into an uncharted section of Cueva del Guacharo National Park in Venezuela found a cave that opened into something he wasn't prepared for. Inside, spread across the surface in every direction, were dark, fleshy limbs, arranged exactly like a spider's legs, attached to a body that filled more of that space than anything in that cave had any right to. It was completely motionless, and it produced a smell strong enough to reach him before he even got close. He used the stillness as his window to leave. Comment below, what do you want to see in the next video? Barn Visitor.
¡Se la lleva!
Parece un niño, pero mira sus orejas.
A farmer spotted something moving through his barn in broad daylight that made him stop completely. It was small and hunched, covered in reddish wild hair, with a build that didn't fit any animal he had ever seen on or near his land. Before he could get any closer, it bolted, crossed the yard in seconds, and disappeared straight into the cornfield. He searched the area thoroughly afterward and found nothing on the other side. No tracks pressed into the soil, no broken stalks, no sign that anything had passed through at all. Whatever had been standing in his barn moments earlier had vanished as cleanly as if it had never been there.
¡Se la lleva!
Parece un niño, pero mira sus orejas.
Highland Formation. While exploring the Scottish Highlands, a group of teenagers found a cave carved into the hillside and stopped when something emerged from it. Then another, large wolf-like creatures standing fully upright on two legs, filing out one by one and arranging themselves in a deliberate line outside the entrance. They weren't hunting, they weren't reacting. They were assembling heads raised, scanning the open field around them like they were waiting for a signal or a presence that hadn't arrived yet. The teenagers left before that presence showed up. The footage they captured on the way out showed the creatures still standing in that line, completely still, completely focused on something none of the teenagers could see. Devil's Cave. Devil's Cave in Mazatlan, Mexico carries a history heavy enough on its own. Used as a storage site during the Mexican Revolution, it had always felt like a place with more past than most. But when a group of adventurers explored it in 2015, they found something that